You've arrived at this moment with a quiet awareness. Maybe it's the start of a new year, or perhaps it's just another day that somehow feels heavier than the last. There's a subtle tension within you, a sense that something needs to shift, that the person you are now is not quite the person you were meant to become. It's not about failure. It's not about laziness. It's not even about lacking willpower. It's about the quiet accumulation of small compromises, the unnoticed habits, and the identities you've unconsciously accepted over time. You've tried before, haven't you? Perhaps you've set goals, bought books, listened to speeches, made lists. You poured energy into motivation, and yet, somehow, the spark faded, the effort waned, and the change never truly settled into who you are. This is not a flaw. This is human. You are not broken. You are simply following a pattern that no longer serves you. Here's the real challenge. Change is not about motivation. It's not about moments of inspiration or bursts of energy. Motivation comes and goes. It flickers, it fades, and it often disappears at the very moment you need it most. And goals, they are helpful, yes, but goals alone cannot change who you are at your core. They cannot shift the silent scripts in your mind, the identity you carry into every decision, every interaction, every choice. This is why the old ways of trying harder fail. They fail because they target action without addressing identity. They push behavior without aligning it to who you are beneath the surface. The real work, the quiet work, is internal. It is subtle. It is persistent. It is a shift that doesn't happen in a single day, a single resolution, or a single motivational speech. This audiobook is not about hype. It is not about instant transformation. It is not about rushing or overwhelming yourself. Instead, it is a conversation, a steady, calm reflection on what it means to reset, to quietly rebuild, and to step into a version of yourself that moves through life with more clarity, more stability, and more control. It's about building a foundation for the year ahead, a foundation that does not rely on willpower, luck, or fleeting bursts of motivation. We will explore the ways you unconsciously hold yourself back, the beliefs that silently shape your choices, and the patterns that determine your life long before you even realize it. You will discover how to act from a place of consistency rather than pressure, from identity rather than desire, from clarity rather than chaos. You will learn to move through your days with calm authority, not because you are forcing yourself to, but because you are becoming the kind of person for whom these actions are natural. This is not a race. There is no finish line waiting to validate your effort. The shift you seek is not about proving anything to the world. It is about proving something to yourself, that you can be deliberate, consistent, and grounded in who you truly are. The journey you are about to take is quiet, patient, and deep. It is a process of becoming. So if you are tired of starting over and stopping short, if you are ready to step into a new rhythm, a new way of thinking, and a new way of being, this is your moment. There is no judgment here, no pressure to be better immediately. There is only the invitation to begin again, gently and deliberately. Take a breath. Feel the space around you. Feel the possibility that exists when you stop forcing change and start aligning with it. This is your reset moment. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why People Fail to Change. You've probably tried to change before. Perhaps you promised yourself you would start eating better, exercising, focusing more at work, or finally finishing the project you've been putting off. You felt a surge of hope at the start, a quiet belief that this time might be different. And yet, somewhere along the way, it didn't stick. You drifted back into old routines. You wondered what went wrong, and maybe even questioned yourself, am I just not capable of change? This feeling is more common than you realize. Almost everyone struggles with change, not because they lack desire or intelligence, but because the framework we often rely on is flawed. We assume that willpower alone can carry us, that bursts of motivation or rigid goals will produce transformation. But real life does not respond to force. Real change is quiet, persistent, and anchored in who you are, not in who you wish you could be. The truth is, people fail to change because they try to skip the deepest work. They attack behavior without addressing identity. You can try to force yourself to wake up early, to go to the gym, or to write daily. But if your inner narrative does not see you as the kind of person who does these things, the effort will always feel like pushing a boulder uphill. And just like that, the boulder rolls back, leaving frustration in its wake. We are not machines. We cannot simply overwrite habits with sheer effort. Our minds are built to preserve continuity, to protect the identity we've known. When we try to adopt a new behavior that conflicts with that identity, resistance arises, not as a sign of weakness, but as a natural mechanism. You may feel doubt, boredom, or even anxiety. These are not signals that you are failing. They are signals that you are at the threshold of real growth, that your system is questioning whether this change is authentic to who you are becoming. Consider this: most self-improvement advice focuses on external actions. It tells you to wake up early, plan meticulously, or visualize success. All of these can help in the short term, but they rarely address the invisible layer beneath your choices, the layer of identity. Until that layer shifts, your attempts at change will always be fragile. They will depend on fleeting energy, temporary motivation, or external pressure. And when those fade, the habits fade too. The real shift happens when you start seeing yourself differently. When you stop defining yourself by what you haven't accomplished and start defining yourself by the person you are choosing to become. This is subtle but powerful. It changes the game entirely. Instead of forcing behavior, you allow behavior to emerge naturally from a new internal standard. You don't chase change, you embody it. You may be wondering, if motivation isn't enough, what is? The answer is consistency grounded in identity. It's a quiet, deliberate alignment between who you know yourself to be and how you act. It's not about intensity or dramatic bursts. It's about small, repeated behaviors that, over time, cement a new identity. You do not need to transform overnight. You do not need to feel unstoppable every day. What matters is that your decisions, your pauses, and your actions slowly reflect the person you are becoming. It's also important to acknowledge the emotional resistance. You will encounter moments of doubt. You will feel tired of trying. You will question if the effort is worth it. This is not failure. It is the mind signaling that it is recalibrating, negotiating, and learning to accept a new version of yourself. Resistance is part of the process. Growth does not arrive wrapped in comfort. It comes quietly, in moments that feel ordinary, repeated often enough to become familiar, until the new identity feels like the only natural choice. When you understand this, you start shifting power. You move from reacting to impulse, from chasing motivation, to making choices based on deliberate identity standards. You begin to act because it is who you are, not because you are trying to push yourself into someone else's mold. This internal authority is where real change takes root. You are no longer at the mercy of energy or inspiration. You are anchored in the consistent expression of your identity. Change, then, is less about forcing yourself and more about settling into a version of yourself that already exists, waiting to be fully recognized. It is about quiet alignment, subtle reinforcement, and patience. There is no shame in having tried before. There is no shame in having drifted back into old patterns. Every attempt was part of the preparation for this moment, the moment when you begin to act from identity rather than hope. As you move forward, remember this: failing to change in the past does not define you. What defines you is what you do next, not the mistakes you've made along the way. The difference now is that you are willing to pause, reflect, and choose a path that does not rely on fleeting bursts of energy or motivation. You are ready to anchor yourself in identity, to let consistent, deliberate action emerge naturally. Take a quiet breath and imagine a life where change no longer feels like a battle. Imagine moving through each day with a steady, calm authority, where decisions align with who you are, not who you feel pressured to be. This is possible. Not because of force or willpower, but because you are about to understand the truth about change, that it is always an identity shift first, a behavior shift second. And with that understanding, the path forward begins to feel less like a climb and more like a natural unfolding. Chapter 2: Letting Go of the Old Identity. You carry a version of yourself that is familiar. It has been with you for years, quietly shaping how you see the world, how you respond to situations, and how you interpret your own potential. This identity, the habits, the excuses, the patterns of thought, feels safe. Even when it limits you, even when it frustrates you, there is comfort in the known. Letting it go is difficult because it is more than behavior. It is a sense of who you are. And who wants to let go of themselves? Most people believe that change is about adding new routines or pushing harder. They imagine that if they simply act differently, their life will improve. But without addressing the foundation of identity, these actions are temporary. You can try the diets, the schedules, the affirmations, yet the underlying you remains the same. You'll revert to what feels familiar, not out of weakness, but out of alignment. This is why so many attempts to change feel like an uphill battle, exhausting and futile. The old identity is persuasive. It whispers that you are defined by your past choices, by the patterns you've repeated, by the limits you've accepted. It reminds you of your failures more than your potential. It makes consistency feel like a strain, and discomfort feel dangerous. But here is the quiet truth: your identity is not fixed. It has been shaped over time, yes, but it can be reshaped. Not overnight, not through force, but through awareness and deliberate alignment. Letting go is not about erasing who you were. It's about recognizing that who you were does not have to define who you are. The mistakes, the missed opportunities, the habits that no longer serve you, they are not your sentence. They are the material from which you will build a new self. You are allowed to release the past without guilt, to step into a life that requires a different version of you. Notice how your old identity shows up. It may speak through self-doubt, through the desire to retreat to comfort, through procrastination disguised as waiting for the right moment. These are all familiar voices, echoes of a version of yourself that believes security is found in sameness. They are not villains, they are signals. They indicate the areas where growth is asking for attention. To release the old identity, you must begin by observing without judgment. See the habits that no longer serve you. See the ways you hold yourself back. See the stories you tell yourself about why change is difficult, why success feels distant, why certain behaviors just aren't you. These are the markers of the identity you have outgrown. And here is the key: observing these patterns is already a subtle act of separation. You are beginning to step outside of them, even before action is required. As you begin this separation, imagine a new version of yourself, one who responds differently, who holds a different standard, who moves through life with intention and clarity. This is not a fantasy, it is an identity you can inhabit gradually. Start by noticing how the old self feels and how the new self might respond. The old self reacts, the new self chooses. The old self hesitates, the new self moves deliberately. The old self fears discomfort, the new self understands it as a guide. The shift is subtle, almost imperceptible at first. You will not feel a dramatic transformation immediately. And that is entirely normal. The mind clings to the familiar because the familiar is safe. Resistance is natural. Doubt will arise. You may even question whether this new identity is real or sustainable. Allow it. Let it exist without giving it control. Growth often arrives quietly, in the spaces between what you have always done and what you are now willing to explore. Behaviorally, letting go of the old identity does not require heroic feats. It is in the small choices you make each day, choosing a slightly different response when stress arises, allowing yourself to sit with discomfort instead of fleeing, prioritizing your internal values over immediate comfort. These are not dramatic actions, but over time, they compound into a new pattern of being. You are not performing, you are aligning. Emotionally, this process may feel unsettling. You might feel loss, nostalgia, or even guilt as you release old patterns. This is natural. Your past self was doing its best within its limits. Acknowledging this with compassion allows you to step forward without self-judgment. Discomfort is not a signal to stop, it is a sign that the old boundaries of identity are being stretched. You are expanding. The internal authority you are cultivating is calm and deliberate. It is the quiet understanding that identity is chosen, not given. You are learning to pause before reacting, to act in alignment with the self you intend to be, rather than the self you have been conditioned to remain. The more you practice this, the more your decisions begin to flow naturally from your new identity rather than from fleeting emotions or old habits. As this chapter closes, take a moment to breathe with this idea. You are not abandoning yourself, you are growing into a fuller, more authentic version of who you are. The past has value, but it does not dictate your future. Every time you observe an old habit, a familiar reaction, or a limiting belief without immediately acting on it, you are letting go. Each small pause, each conscious choice, each moment of alignment is a quiet step toward the person you are becoming. Letting go of the old identity is not a single act. It is a series of subtle, deliberate shifts. And with each shift, you are building a foundation for consistency, clarity, and calm authority. You are learning to respond rather than react, to choose rather than drift, and to inhabit a version of yourself that is quietly stronger and more deliberate than before. Step into this process gently. Watch, feel, choose. There is no rush. There is only the unfolding of a new self, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you are moving in alignment with who you truly want to be. Chapter 3. Stop waiting for motivation. You've probably noticed by now that motivation is a fleeting visitor. It arrives unannounced, shines brightly for a moment, and then disappears without warning. You wait for it, hoping for that spark, believing that when motivation comes, action will follow naturally. And when it doesn't, you feel stuck, frustrated, maybe even ashamed. This belief, that motivation must precede action, is so common, so deeply ingrained, that most people live their lives waiting for it. You are not alone in this. Everyone has fallen into the trap of expecting a surge of inspiration before they begin, before they commit, before they truly take control of their own life. But here's the quiet truth: motivation is unreliable. It cannot be summoned at will. It cannot be stored for later. It cannot carry you through the days when resistance, boredom, and doubt arise. Relying on motivation is like waiting for the sun to rise before planting your seeds. Sometimes the sun comes late. Sometimes clouds cover it for days. And if you only plant when the sun shines, nothing ever grows. Waiting for motivation keeps you small. It reinforces a subtle dependency, the belief that you need a feeling, a rush, an external push, in order to act. This belief quietly shapes your identity. It tells you that you are reactive, dependent, and at the mercy of your emotions. It tells you that change is something that happens to you, not something you create. And because of this, you repeat the cycle, wanting, waiting, starting, stalling, over and over again. The new identity standard is simple but profound. The person you are becoming does not wait for motivation. They move consistently, even when inspiration is absent. They act not because they feel like it, but because their actions are aligned with the version of themselves they respect. Discipline becomes their companion, consistency their guide. Motivation may visit, but it is no longer required. So what does acting without motivation look like? It is quiet. It is patient. It is showing up, day after day, without relying on a feeling to propel you. It is the simple habit of choosing what matters, even when you would rather avoid it. It is pouring energy into the process, not because it excites you in the moment, but because it cultivates the person you want to be. There is no dramatic breakthrough. There is only steady movement, repetition, and alignment. Over time, this consistency compounds. Over time, it becomes effortless because it is no longer a struggle, it is who you are. Resistance will arise. You will feel doubt. Some days, it will feel unbearable. The mind will whisper that you need to wait, that you are not ready, that the timing must be perfect. This is normal. Discomfort is not a sign of failure. It is a signal that you are stepping outside of old patterns and into a new form of self. Learning to act without motivation is not about denying your feelings. It is about choosing action even when your feelings are unreliable. The power shift here is subtle but transformative. You no longer hand over authority to fleeting emotions. You move from reaction to decision. You act from a place of identity rather than impulse. You discover that your ability to follow through does not depend on how you feel, but on who you are becoming. Your mind may resist, your body may protest, your heart may long for ease, but the decision, the quiet commitment to act, remains yours. And there is a strange beauty in this. Once you stop waiting, you notice how much time and energy you were giving away to a feeling that was never reliable. You begin to see that motivation is a byproduct, not a prerequisite. When you consistently act from identity, motivation shows up naturally, like sunlight spilling over a horizon already walked into. It is no longer the driver, it is the reflection of steady progress. So today, and tomorrow, and the day after, practice the quiet refusal to wait. Take the smallest actions aligned with who you want to be. Ignore the itch to wait for inspiration. Let your life be a series of deliberate, consistent choices, even in the absence of feeling. This is where true transformation quietly begins. And as you move through this, notice the calm confidence that grows inside you. It is not loud. It is not flashy. It is a steady pulse, a quiet certainty that you can rely on yourself. The need for motivation fades. You are no longer waiting. You are already moving, and in that movement, a new identity is taking root, one that does not depend on luck, emotion, or timing. One that moves because it has decided to. The day will come when you look back and realize that waiting was never necessary. You will see that what mattered was not a fleeting spark, but the patient, consistent choices that compounded silently over time. You will understand that motivation is not the gatekeeper of action, it is the shadow of a life lived with quiet consistency. And so, with a gentle breath, recognize this moment as another choice. Not motivated, not inspired, not forced, but deliberate. A small, steady step in the direction of the version of yourself you respect. You do not need to feel ready. You do not need to wait. You only need to begin again here now, as the person who keeps moving, whether motivation is present or not. Chapter 4: Discipline as Self-Trust. You may have thought of discipline as a rigid system, something external, imposed, or even unpleasant, a tool of punishment rather than guidance. Perhaps you've resisted it, believing that strict schedules, routines, or repeated effort are a kind of suffering. Many people hold this belief. Discipline is often portrayed as something that takes away freedom, something that binds rather than liberates. It's normal to feel that way, and it doesn't mean you lack character. It means you've been seeing it from the outside, through a lens that emphasizes control instead of self-alignment. The truth is, discipline fails when it is disconnected from trust. If you rely only on motivation, excitement, or guilt, discipline crumbles at the first sign of discomfort. You can push yourself for a day, a week, even a month, but without a foundation in self-trust, the effort eventually leaks away. You may even notice it, a voice inside that whispers, "I can skip this today," or "I'll start again tomorrow." That voice is not weakness, it is the natural reaction of a system that hasn't yet fully accepted its own reliability. When you reframe discipline as self-trust, everything changes. It is no longer a set of imposed rules, it becomes a promise to yourself. A quiet commitment that you will honor the person you are becoming, even when it is inconvenient or uncomfortable. Self-trust is built in small, consistent choices, showing up when you don't feel like it, honoring the routines that matter, and keeping the agreements you make with yourself. Each time you do, you reinforce the internal knowledge that you are dependable. You are a person who follows through. Think of identity as a quiet, invisible fabric woven from these small choices. When you act consistently, when you honor yourself, that fabric strengthens. The person who trusts themselves becomes someone who doesn't need constant motivation. They move through their days guided by an inner authority, not by the highs and lows of fleeting feelings. Discipline becomes a reflection of who you are, not a burden imposed from outside. The behaviors that build this kind of self-trust are subtle, almost invisible. They are not grand gestures or dramatic life overhauls. They are showing up for yourself when no one else is watching, choosing the small actions that align with your values, keeping promises made to the quietest part of your mind. It is consistency over intensity. It is the gentle accumulation of effort, repeated enough times that it becomes the fabric of your identity. Resistance will arise, naturally. You may feel bored with repetition, doubt creeping in, or a quiet desire to abandon the path. These are not signs of failure. They are signals that the work is real, that the change is meaningful. Discomfort is not the enemy, it is the whisper that you are moving beyond old patterns. You learn to sit with it, to acknowledge it without letting it dictate your next choice. You develop a kind of patience with yourself, a recognition that growth is never instantaneous, but it is reliable when cultivated steadily. The internal authority shift here is subtle but profound. You move from reacting to feelings, boredom, doubt, desire, to making deliberate choices. You act from a place of decision rather than reaction. You act from a quiet assurance that the person you are becoming deserves your commitment. Motivation may come and go, but your decisions, anchored in self-trust, persist. Over time, you learn that discipline is not a chore, it is a declaration. It is the way you prove to yourself that you are reliable, capable, and aligned with your values. As you settle into this understanding, notice how your perception of effort changes. Discipline is no longer a battle between want and resistance. It is a conversation with yourself, a calm and deliberate affirmation of identity. You stop asking whether you feel like it. You stop bargaining with your emotions. Instead, you cultivate a quiet, steady presence, a trust in your ability to follow through, day after day, moment by moment. Pause and reflect on that. Imagine the subtle confidence that comes from knowing you can count on yourself. The energy that emerges when you no longer chase motivation, but rely on a steady, self-trusting rhythm. There is freedom in this. There is calm in this. There is a kind of inner power that is often invisible to the world, yet unmistakable to you. Discipline as self-trust is not flashy. It does not seek recognition or applause. It grows quietly, invisibly, shaping your choices long before they are noticed by anyone else. And the more you honor this practice, the more the world outside aligns with the person you have become internally. As you move forward, let this understanding settle within you. Trust becomes your foundation. Consistency becomes your language. You no longer fear the days when motivation falters because you know that the person you are is dependable, even when feelings are inconsistent. And in that quiet, steady commitment, you begin to experience a form of freedom that cannot be taken away, a freedom built on self-trust, on identity, on the quiet assurance that you are capable of being who you say you are. Chapter 5. Comfort with Solitude. There is a quiet unease that many people feel when they are alone. You may have noticed it, the subtle tension when the room falls silent, when your phone is out of reach, when there's no one to fill the space with conversation or distraction. It's a discomfort that seems almost universal, as if being alone is something to be feared or avoided. You are not alone in this feeling. Most people move through life trying to escape these quiet moments, filling them with noise, social obligations, or mindless scrolling. It feels safer to be with others, to merge your energy with theirs, than to face the stillness within yourself. Yet, this discomfort is often misunderstood. Many assume that feeling uneasy alone means there is something wrong with them, that they are incomplete, lonely, or lacking in some way. And so they avoid solitude, thinking it will bring clarity, growth, or peace. The truth is simpler and quieter. The problem is not solitude itself. The problem is the relationship you have with yourself in that space. When you fear being alone, you are avoiding yourself, your thoughts, your feelings, and the truths that quietly shape your life. When you stop fleeing, when you allow yourself to simply sit with your own presence, a transformation begins. Solitude is not emptiness, it is a mirror. It shows you who you are not, and who you are becoming. It allows you to notice patterns that go unnoticed in the distraction of company. It gives space for reflection, for pause, for clarity. When you are alone, you learn to observe your thoughts without being swept away by them. You learn that discomfort does not need to be resolved instantly, that moments of boredom or anxiety are not failures, but signals of growth. Consider how solitude shapes identity. If you constantly avoid it, your identity becomes externally defined. You're what others think of you, what others expect from you, what the world allows you to be. If you embrace it, your identity shifts inward. You begin to define yourself by your values, your principles, and your quiet standards. You start to trust your own judgment, to honor your own boundaries, and to rely on your internal authority rather than external validation. This is the identity of someone who is steady, self-reliant, and unshaken by the noise of the world. In practice, comfort with solitude is not about grand rituals or dramatic retreats. It is the small, repeated behaviors that signal to yourself that you are capable of your own company. It is sitting quietly without distraction, noticing your breath, allowing thoughts to surface and pass. It is choosing reflection over reaction, observation over judgment. These behaviors are subtle, often imperceptible to others, yet they accumulate into a deep, unshakable sense of self-trust. Consistency, not intensity, is the quiet key. Of course, solitude can feel uncomfortable. Boredom arises. Doubt surfaces. A part of you may resist, whispering that you are missing out, that something is wrong, that you should be elsewhere. This is normal. This resistance is not a signal of weakness, it is a signal that growth is occurring. Discomfort is the language of adaptation. Sitting with it, observing it without acting impulsively, slowly rewires your mind to find safety and peace in your own presence. The power of solitude lies not in the absence of others, but in the authority it builds within you. When you are alone, you practice self-governance. You learn to pause before reacting, to reflect before deciding, and to respond to life from a place of calm rather than compulsion. You are no longer at the mercy of circumstance or social expectation. You cultivate internal stability, a quiet center that no outside force can easily disturb. Let this chapter end with a gentle reflection. Being comfortable alone does not make you isolated. It makes you grounded. It makes you patient. It makes you aware. The world around you will continue to pull at your attention, to demand your energy, to suggest that being alone is a failure or a punishment. But in truth, solitude is a teacher, a guide, and a companion. It is where clarity emerges, where decisions are refined, where the self you are building can breathe and grow. Sit with that thought, quietly. Allow yourself the space to notice what it feels like to simply exist without distraction. The room is still. Your mind is still. You are still. And in this stillness, the quiet work of becoming yourself continues, patiently, without rush, without pressure. Chapter 6: Environment and Influence. You've probably noticed it before, the subtle way certain places, people, or routines shape you. Sometimes it's almost invisible. You enter a room and your energy shifts. You sit with certain people and your thoughts feel heavier or lighter, more rigid or more free. This influence is quiet, persistent, and often unnoticed until you step back and look at your life as a whole. Most of us believe that change happens because of willpower, or effort, or sheer desire. We tell ourselves that if we just push harder, try harder, we will become different. And yet, no matter how disciplined, there are invisible currents that pull us back into old habits. These currents are our environment and the people who surround us. They are the unspoken rules of the spaces we inhabit, the routines we rarely examine, and the subtle expectations we accept as normal. It's a common assumption that environment is secondary to personal effort. Many believe that if they are strong enough, they can thrive anywhere, with anyone, under any conditions. It's a widely held belief. You might have thought it yourself. But in reality, even the strongest resolve can be worn down over time if the surroundings are not aligned with the person you want to become. Consider this: you might move through your days carrying a vision for yourself, but if your environment reinforces old patterns, it quietly undermines that vision. Noise, distractions, unresolved tensions, negative influences, even physical clutter, these are not merely inconveniences. They shape your thinking, your choices, your mood, and eventually your identity. They whisper to you what is possible, what is normal, and what is acceptable. Here's the subtle truth: change is rarely just about internal struggle. The external world is part of your internal architecture. When the world you inhabit is inconsistent with who you want to be, your energy leaks. You don't fail because you lack discipline. You fail because the currents around you are pulling you back into old patterns. And this is not a personal failure. It is simply how humans are wired. We are relational, environmental creatures. We absorb the energy of the spaces and people around us. So what does it mean to shift? It does not mean abandoning responsibility or avoiding challenges. It means recognizing that influence is constant, and aligning your environment is a form of self-respect. It's about creating spaces, routines, and associations that reflect who you are becoming. Imagine living in a room that mirrors your values, filled with objects, routines, and reminders that support your calm focus. Imagine choosing people who quietly raise your standards, who act as mirrors of the version of yourself you are cultivating. Not because they dictate your behavior, but because their presence makes consistent action feel natural. The old identity thrives in environments that reinforce it. If you are used to procrastination, comfort, distraction, or judgment, your environment will encourage those behaviors without pause. The new identity, the one you are consciously shaping, requires conditions that make alignment easier than misalignment. It doesn't make the work effortless. You will still feel resistance, still face internal friction. But the friction will be meaningful rather than wasted. It will be the friction of growth, not the friction of environmental sabotage. Let's be clear, influence is not about other people controlling you. It is not about perfection, or isolating yourself entirely, or living in an artificially sanitized space. It is about awareness, subtle adjustment, and quiet intentionality. It's about noticing when the energy around you shapes your choices more than your own values do. And when you notice it, you have the power to change it, slowly and deliberately. Small shifts often matter more than dramatic changes. Adjust your physical space. Notice the habits of those you spend the most time with. Consider what media you consume, the tone of your daily conversations, the unexamined rituals that dominate your hours. These are not minor details. They are the scaffolding upon which identity is built. A life in alignment is built quietly, one subtle adjustment at a time, until who you are inside resonates with the spaces you inhabit. Resistance is natural here. You may feel doubt about whether it makes a difference. You may feel loneliness as you distance yourself from patterns or people that no longer serve your growth. You may feel impatience, wondering why the results are not immediate. These feelings are not signs of failure. They are signals that the change is real, that the new identity is trying to settle into a space that has long been occupied by the old. Let discomfort be your guide. When you notice unease, examine whether it is external pressure or internal resistance, and remember that both are part of growth. The real power in this process is quiet. It is in the decisions you make, not in how you feel. It is in your consistency, not in your occasional bursts of effort. It is in the choice to shape your surroundings thoughtfully, to curate influence consciously, to protect the inner environment where your identity is growing. This is not about controlling everything or isolating yourself. It is about creating enough alignment that consistent action becomes the default, not the exception. So as you reflect on your environment today, notice what lifts you and what weighs you down. Notice the people whose presence feels draining versus those whose energy supports you. Notice the spaces that invite calm focus versus the ones that invite distraction. And then slowly begin to adjust. Make the subtle choices that honor the person you are becoming. Move toward influence that aligns, and away from influence that undermines. In the quiet moments, you will feel the difference. You will notice that your decisions feel lighter, more natural. You will notice that consistency is easier because the friction of misalignment is reduced. Your environment becomes a partner rather than a challenge, a silent supporter rather than a constant tug backward. And through this, your identity begins to anchor more firmly in the person you are choosing to be. And finally, as you settle into this awareness, let yourself be patient. Influence is not immediate. Realignment takes time. Your old identity will whisper, attempting to pull you back. That is normal. That is human. But each deliberate adjustment, each conscious alignment, is a quiet declaration of who you are becoming. This is not flashy or dramatic. It is subtle, but it is unshakable. Take a moment now to imagine your environment as an extension of your new identity. Let the calm intention of alignment settle within you. Feel how it supports the choices you want to make, the person you want to be. And as you carry this awareness forward, remember, influence is not about others. It is about creating the conditions in which the version of yourself you desire naturally emerges. The spaces you occupy, the people you trust, the routines you repeat, they are all mirrors. They are reflections of who you allow yourself to be. And when you begin to curate these reflections carefully, the person in those mirrors begins to feel like home. Chapter 7: Emotional Control. You may have noticed by now that emotions are not merely reactions. They are currents that shape your decisions, quietly pulling you in directions you may not even intend to go. Most people believe that to control their lives, they must control outcomes, fix circumstances, or manage what others think. But in truth, the most profound form of control is not over the world. It is over yourself, over the way you allow emotions to move through you. It's normal to think that strong emotions must be acted on, that frustration needs an outlet, that anger must be expressed, that sadness requires explanation. Everyone feels this. We are taught, by experience and by culture, that our emotions define our actions. And so we respond. We react. Sometimes we overreact. Sometimes we act in ways that later feel foreign to who we believe we are. This is how emotions quietly shape lives, creating cycles that are difficult to break. The first step in understanding emotional control is realizing that emotions themselves are not the enemy. They are signals, not orders. Frustration, anxiety, anger, disappointment, these are not indicators that you are failing. They are indicators that you are encountering resistance, that something matters, that you are alive and engaged with your circumstances. What becomes important is the choice you make when these feelings arise. Do you hand over your power to them, or do you pause, observe, and decide? Consider how most people attempt control. They suppress, they ignore, or they distract themselves. They try to outrun their feelings or push them underground. But suppression only buries the emotion temporarily. Ignoring it creates tension, and distraction offers a short-lived escape. None of these create mastery. True emotional control comes from presence and observation, from noticing the feeling without believing it must dictate action, from understanding that the intensity of a moment is not a verdict on your life. At the identity level, the way you respond to emotion says more about who you are than any achievement or goal. Someone who lashes out under stress is not simply emotional, they have accepted the identity of a reactor. Someone who avoids discomfort at all costs has accepted the identity of a pleaser. But someone who can feel deeply, acknowledge the discomfort, and still act in alignment with their values has accepted a different identity. The identity of someone who is calm, deliberate, and sovereign in their inner world. This identity does not eliminate emotion, it transforms the relationship you have with it. Behaviorally, This does not require complex techniques or endless self-analysis. It is quiet, small, and repeatable. It is noticing the rise of irritation in your chest and simply pausing before speaking. It is taking a breath when fear whispers that you are inadequate. It is sitting with disappointment for a few moments, acknowledging it, and then choosing to respond rather than react. These moments may seem insignificant at first, but they compound. Over time, they become the natural rhythm of your life. Consistency, not intensity, creates mastery. You will feel resistance. You will feel boredom or frustration as you attempt to shift the way you relate to your feelings. That is normal. Emotional control is not meant to be comfortable. Comfort is often the enemy of growth. Every twinge of discomfort, every surge of doubt, every hesitation is a signal that you are moving toward a stronger sense of self. It is not a failure, it is a measurement of progress. Accept it, feel it, and let it pass without handing it the power to dictate your day. One of the quietest but most profound shifts comes when you recognize that you do not need to be motivated to act in alignment with your values. Motivation will rise and fall, as it always has. But your decision to pause, to breathe, to reflect, to respond deliberately, becomes independent of fleeting feelings. Your internal authority moves from reaction to choice. You become the observer and the executor simultaneously, the one who notices the storm of emotion and chooses to move through it with steadiness. As this becomes your practice, you notice subtler changes. Conversations are less reactive. Decisions are clearer. You move through discomfort with calm rather than resistance. You understand that emotions are part of life, but they are not your ruler. They are the signals that tell you where to pause, where to reflect, and where to act. Your power grows not by suppressing them, but by refusing to let them dictate the narrative of your life. And so, as this chapter closes, consider this: emotional control is not about being cold or detached. It is about being fully alive while refusing to be hijacked by the currents of your mind. It is about being patient with yourself, yet firm in your choice to act with alignment. Each moment you pause, each moment you breathe, each moment you observe instead of react, you reinforce the identity of someone who is calm, deliberate, and grounded. Let yourself feel. Let yourself observe. Let yourself choose. And in that quiet choice lies the power that transforms ordinary days into steady, controlled, and aligned life. Chapter 8: Imperfect Action Over Perfection. You've probably noticed by now that waiting for the perfect moment rarely works. We tell ourselves we need the right conditions, the ideal timing, the complete clarity before taking a step forward. Perfection becomes a quiet excuse, a way to stall. It masquerades as prudence, but in truth, it quietly keeps you stuck. You are not alone in this. Nearly everyone waits for circumstances to feel right, as if the universe owes us a flawless setup before we act. It is normal to crave certainty, to wish the path were smooth and clear. Yet, the truth is that perfection is an illusion. The world is rarely organized in a way that accommodates our timelines or our readiness. Waiting for perfect conditions rarely leads to progress. It only strengthens the habits of hesitation and self-doubt. Every day spent waiting is a day spent reinforcing old patterns, letting fear dictate your choices, letting indecision accumulate quietly into stagnation. This pattern shapes identity more than most realize. If you are always waiting, you begin to see yourself as someone who hesitates, someone who can't commit, someone who needs conditions to be flawless to even start. That identity quietly infiltrates your life, showing up in small ways: unfinished projects, unspoken ideas, delayed decisions. And because identity drives behavior far more than motivation ever could, waiting becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The alternative, the new standard, is simple in theory, but subtle in practice. Action, even when imperfect, builds momentum, confidence, and skill. Identity shifts not because you are flawless, but because you act. You prove to yourself that you are someone who moves, someone who engages, someone who prioritizes growth over idealized outcomes. The small steps, even messy ones, accumulate. They teach resilience, adaptability, and courage. You learn to refine as you go, to course-correct in real time, to trust yourself more than you trust conditions. This does not mean reckless action. It does not mean ignoring consequences or being careless. It means choosing progress over waiting, doing enough to move forward, even when the map is incomplete. Your behaviors are no longer dictated by fear of imperfection. They are guided by a quiet trust that you can handle the process, that mistakes are part of learning, that discomfort is part of growth. You begin to see that action, even flawed, is far more productive than hesitation. The discomfort of imperfect action is natural. You will feel uncertainty. You will doubt yourself. You may fumble, stumble, and sometimes fail. These feelings are not signs that you are doing it wrong. They are evidence that you are moving. They are signals that you are leaving the old pattern behind and stepping into an identity that prioritizes doing over waiting. Growth often feels awkward. Progress often feels uneven. But the rhythm of consistent imperfect action is what eventually becomes natural, effortless, and aligned with who you are becoming. This is where your internal authority begins to shift. You no longer wait for motivation to strike. You no longer rely on the illusion of ideal conditions. You make the decision to act, even when it is messy, and trust yourself to adapt. The power moves from reaction to decision, from procrastination to movement, from fear to quiet courage. You recognize that waiting for perfect clarity is less important than cultivating the habit of beginning, adjusting, and continuing. Each small, imperfect step reinforces the truth that you are someone who moves, someone who persists, someone who transforms quietly but surely. Reflect for a moment on the choices you've delayed. The ideas you've postponed. The actions you've held back because they didn't feel ready. Imagine if you approached them differently, not with pressure, but with curiosity, trust, and acceptance. Imagine engaging with them imperfectly, learning as you go, refining as you move forward. Each attempt, each small flawed action, strengthens the identity of a person who doesn't wait, who doesn't hesitate, who chooses progress over perfection. And so, you continue forward. You act when ready, even when not entirely ready. You create, experiment, and adjust. You let the discomfort exist without letting it control you. You see mistakes not as failures, but as information, as steps in the ongoing process of becoming. The quiet, patient accumulation of these imperfect actions forms a foundation no motivation can provide. It becomes proof to yourself: you are capable, you are moving, and you are aligned with the life you want to live. Pause and consider the weight of waiting for everything to be perfect. Then feel the lightness that comes with allowing yourself to act, to try, to engage without the expectation of flawlessness. Progress does not require perfection. Identity does not depend on it. Life is not about waiting for the perfect moment. It is about creating forward motion, even in the middle of uncertainty, even amidst imperfection. The path forward is built on these small imperfect acts. They are not glamorous. They are not loud. But they are real. They are yours. And each one slowly rewires your mind, reshapes your habits, and reshapes your identity. Step by step, you build confidence not from results, but from the courage to act. You learn that the power of movement, even imperfect, far outweighs the paralysis of waiting. And now, as this quiet reflection settles, feel the calm within you. The recognition that perfection is not the goal, that action itself carries its own strength, and that your new identity is one of engagement, resilience, and consistent, imperfect movement. Let this understanding linger. Let it guide you gently into the days ahead, where progress becomes a habit, and hesitation loses its quiet hold. Chapter 9: Self-Respect and Alignment. You might not realize it, but much of the friction in your life comes from small betrayals of yourself. Moments when you compromise, just to avoid conflict, to please someone else, or to fit into a mold that never quite belonged to you. These are quiet acts, barely noticed, yet they shape your sense of self far more than any grand failure ever could. It's normal to have done this. Everyone has. You've been taught, often unconsciously, that self-sacrifice equals virtue, that bending for others is loyalty, that agreeing when you want to dissent is maturity. It's not laziness. It's not selfishness. It's habit. And yet, the truth is simple: when you repeatedly ignore your own standards, you erode your self-respect. You slowly stop trusting your own instincts, your own voice. You begin to seek permission from others before you move, doubt your choices, and postpone your own growth in subtle ways. Self-respect is not arrogance. It is not rigidity. It is quiet alignment, the agreement between who you are inside and the actions you take in the world. This alignment begins with noticing. Noticing the moments when you speak words you don't fully mean, when you accept circumstances that feel uncomfortable, when you compromise your values for short-term peace. These moments are not failures, they are information. They tell you where your identity is still weak, where your self-authority has been surrendered. They illuminate the gap between the person you are and the person you want to become. You may carry the belief that respecting yourself means being unyielding, distant, or isolated. That protecting your boundaries requires conflict, confrontation, or sharpness. In reality, self-respect is quiet. It is firm, yes, but also calm. It allows you to navigate the world without losing yourself in it. Alignment is not about perfection. It is about consistently choosing actions, words, and thoughts that reflect the values you claim to hold. Start by observing where your choices drift from your true standards. You don't need to overhaul everything at once. There is no heroic transformation required. Instead, notice the small daily decisions where compromise has crept in. Notice when you tolerate things because it's easier than asserting your preference. Notice when you defer to someone else because their urgency outweighs your own inner voice. These observations are not criticisms. They are simply signals that your alignment needs attention. Alignment is cultivated through repeated, intentional behavior. It is expressed in the way you respond to others, the way you manage your commitments, and the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching. It is the consistency of showing up for yourself in small, often invisible ways. It is honoring your own priorities, your energy, your time, your boundaries. And it is doing so without guilt or defensiveness, without turning self-respect into an act of defiance. Resistance will arise. You will feel doubt, fear, and discomfort. Perhaps you worry about being perceived as difficult, selfish, or uncooperative. Perhaps old voices tell you that pleasing others is the path to safety or love. These feelings are natural. They are the echo of past habits, the patterns that kept you in survival mode. Recognize them without judgment. Let them exist, and let your commitment to alignment quietly outweigh them. Growth is not absence of resistance, it is the willingness to move through it. Your authority over your life shifts when alignment becomes your default. You stop acting reactively or automatically. You stop bending instinctively to the expectations of others. Instead, you pause, sense your truth, and respond from it. This doesn't make life easier, it makes life truer. It gives you the clarity to choose, to act, and to exist in ways that reinforce your identity, rather than erode it. Each act of alignment, no matter how small, compounds. Each moment of self-respect strengthens the bridge between your current self and the self you aspire to be. The subtle power of alignment is that it does not rely on external validation. You don't need applause, recognition, or approval to act in accordance with yourself. You simply practice being the person whose word and actions are inseparable. And over time, this quiet authority permeates every area of your life. Relationships feel more honest, work feels more purposeful, and your internal dialogue becomes a source of trust rather than doubt. This is not about perfection. You will falter. You will sometimes compromise, sometimes defer, sometimes ignore your instincts. That is inevitable. What matters is the overarching direction. The more often you choose alignment over appeasement, respect over concession, truth over comfort, the more your identity transforms. You start to operate from a foundation that does not shake with external circumstances. You move through the world with a grounded clarity, not because you are immune to challenge, but because your inner authority is unwavering. So, in your quiet moments, consider the ways you have allowed yourself to drift. Notice without shame. Then, choose gently but consistently to return. Honor your boundaries. Act in accordance with your principles. Value your time, your energy, and your thoughts. Let self-respect be the silent guide that shapes your behavior before motivation, pressure, or external reward. In the end, alignment is freedom. It is the quiet assurance that you are living a life that belongs to you, rather than a life borrowed from the expectations of others. It is a deep, unshakable trust in your own judgment, a calm insistence on consistency with your values, and the recognition that no one else can grant you what you can give yourself. Every decision, every act, every choice becomes a reflection of who you are, not who you are trying to appear as, not who you are bending to be, but who you truly are. Sit with that. Feel the subtle power of living aligned. Feel the strength in respecting yourself, not through force, but through quiet, unwavering consistency. This is not dramatic. It is not flashy. It is real. It is calm. It is yours. And with each moment you act from this place, the person you are becoming is clearer, steadier, and more fully yourself. Chapter 10: Relapse Prevention and Not Going Back. It's quiet here, in the space where most people stumble. You've built new habits, shifted your thinking, felt a subtle but undeniable alignment with a version of yourself that feels different. And yet, there's always that whisper, that shadow of old patterns, urges to return to what was comfortable, familiar, and predictable. You are not weak. This is normal. The human mind is drawn to what it knows, even when it no longer serves us. The common belief is that relapse is failure. That slipping, even once, erases all progress. Many think that if they falter, they must start over, reset, or punish themselves into compliance. You've seen it in yourself, and perhaps in others, the belief that any misstep is proof of inadequacy. It is a harsh lens, but it is common. And yet, in reality, relapse is not failure. It is a signal, a reminder of the areas where your mind, your habits, or your identity have yet to fully integrate the change. It is a part of learning. It is a reflection of your humanity. When we give this power to relapse, when we allow one moment to overshadow all the growth that preceded it, we reinforce the old identity, the identity that doubts, that procrastinates, that reaches for comfort over alignment. This identity whispers, "You'll never change. You'll always return." And in listening, many do. But it doesn't have to be this way. You have the choice to listen differently, to place your focus on the broader shift rather than the momentary stumble. Identity is your anchor. When your behaviors are aligned with a new identity, returning to old patterns becomes harder, not impossible, but less compelling. This is why small, consistent practices matter. The quiet decisions you make each day, choosing consistency over intensity, choosing presence over reaction, compound. They form a barrier against regression, a subtle gravity that keeps you moving forward. Your actions reinforce your identity, and your identity guides your actions. When you step out of alignment, it is noticeable. It feels uncomfortable. And that discomfort is not a punishment. It is a compass, guiding you back. Relapse often appears as impatience or self-doubt. Perhaps you expected change to feel seamless, immediate, or dramatic. Perhaps the new routines feel tedious or slow. This is natural. Growth is rarely linear. Discomfort is not a signal to stop, it is a signal that something important is happening beneath the surface. The urge to revert is part of the process. Recognize it without judgment. Observe it. Let it exist without letting it dictate your next move. Pause. Reflect. Choose alignment over reaction. Power lies in the quiet moments between impulse and action. The moment before you reach for the familiar, before you sink into old habits, is where your transformation consolidates. Here, you practice internal authority. Here, consistency overrides emotion. Here, identity asserts itself. This is not about perfection. It is about return. It is about the ability to come back to yourself repeatedly, without shame or fear. You may notice that relapse doesn't announce itself dramatically. Often, it creeps in as small concessions, a slight compromise, a brief distraction, a rationalized shortcut. Left unchecked, these small slips gather momentum. But left observed, they are opportunities. They are gentle reminders of where your attention matters most, where alignment is fragile, and where your internal authority can be exercised again. This is the rhythm of lasting change, noticing, correcting, returning, and continuing. It is easy to see relapse as a threat, but it is far more productive to see it as a teacher. It exposes what you value unconsciously, what anchors you, and where you need to reinforce your identity. The people who succeed over time are not those who never stumble, they are those who stumble consciously, reflect deliberately, and return steadily. The power is in your response, not in the misstep itself. As you move forward, consider this quietly: the past version of you, the one who gave in, who waited for motivation, who doubted, who procrastinated, no longer defines the person you are becoming. Each conscious choice to return, to act with consistency, strengthens the new self. Each time you pause, reflect, and align, you reclaim territory that might otherwise slip back into old patterns. You are not avoiding relapse. You are mastering the rhythm of return. Remember, change is not a straight line. There is no finish line that declares, "You are complete." Your work is in the ongoing alignment, living in accordance with your values, your identity, and your intent. The pressure to be perfect is a distraction. What matters is the habit of returning, the practice of recommitment, the quiet consistency that forms the backbone of your new self. Progress is identity. Progress is alignment. Progress is the ability to come back, every time, without judgment, without panic, without self-recrimination. And so, as this chapter closes, let the thought settle: relapse is not the end. It is part of becoming. Your growth is measured not by the absence of stumbles, but by your ability to respond with calm, deliberate choice. Your anchor is within. Your consistency is your power. Your identity, once reshaped, is resilient. And if you feel the pull of the old ways, remember, a new year doesn't change your life. A new version of you does. You've reached the end of this conversation, but not the end of the work. And that distinction matters. What you've been listening to was never meant to push you into a dramatic reinvention or demand immediate proof of change. It was meant to quiet the noise. To give language to what you already sensed. To help you recognize the difference between forcing progress and becoming aligned with who you are choosing to be. There is a phase after clarity that feels deceptively ordinary. Nothing is urgent. Nothing is dramatic. This is where people usually doubt themselves. They wonder if anything is really changing. They look for signs, for momentum, for confirmation. But real transformation rarely announces itself. It settles in quietly. It shows up as steadier reactions, clearer boundaries, more consistent choices, less internal chaos. If impatience appears, let it. If doubt visits, allow it to pass through without negotiation. You don't need to argue with every feeling. You don't need to prove anything to yourself or to anyone else. The work now is simple, even if it isn't easy. Return when you drift. Pause when you feel pulled. Choose alignment when it would be easier to react. This is not about maintaining perfection. It never was. It is about maintaining identity. About remembering who you are becoming when the novelty wears off and the days feel the same. Consistency matters more than intensity. Return matters more than guilt. Stability matters more than speed. A new year does not demand urgency. A new life does not require pressure. What lasts is built quietly, through small decisions made repeatedly, by someone who no longer negotiates with a version of themselves they've outgrown. A new year doesn't change your life. A new version of you does. And that version is already in motion.